In this video, we will cover sentence fragment question subtype. So let's start. What is sentence fragment? So sentence fragments are errors created when a sentence doesn't include an independent clause. An independent clause is a clause that contains a subject and main verb and makes sense on its own. You can either Google independent clauses or you can jump back to the video at the end of this section, which explains independent clauses in more details. For a sentence to make sense, it should have a subject, a main verb, and maybe an object as well. But subject and main verb are super important. Otherwise, it won't be an independent clause and it won't make sense on its own. The sentences which are not independent clauses are called dependent clauses. For example, incorrect would be dogs commonly referred to as man's best friend. Now, this sentence doesn't have a functional verb, right? So, referred is a verb, but on its own, it can't function as the main verb, right? So, if we add an R, then dogs are commonly referred to as the man's best friend. Now, are is a helping verb which helps referred to become the functional verb in the sentence. How does it appear on the test? So on your official SAT, you're likely to see 1 to 2 questions that require you to identify and correct sentence fragment errors. The tips. Number 1, read around non-essential phrases. So just because a clause looks long and complicated doesn't mean it contains all the necessary elements to stand on its own as a sentence. We can eliminate comma-bound phrases within the clause. We can see its structure more easily, right? So if there's a long sentence and if there's a subpart inside of it, which is bounded by 2 commas at the beginning and at the end, we can ignore this part and you can read the sentence by ignoring this. So the simpler sentence will be easy for you to understand. Top tip number 2, ing verbs need help. Verbs that end in ing, like reading, aren't functional verbs. Instead, they are participles, verb forms that need helping verbs like is or has been. If you see a subject lead directly into ing verb without any help, you may have found a sentence fragment error. Let's check out an example. As the position of the sun changes, a crocodile repositions its body to capture warmth. While an open mouth can signal a challenge or a warning, the crocodile, more often than not, simply cooling its brain. Now, if we look at top tip number 1, it tells us to read around non-essential phrases, right? So here we can see that more often than not is surrounded by 2 commas at the beginning, at the end, right? So this is a non-essential phrase. So we can read the sentence as the crocodile simply cooling its brain, right? If you go back to the tips, again it says that ing verbs need help, right? So they can't be they aren't functional verbs and they need is or helping verbs to make sense. Here, simply cooling is a verb, but it's not a functional verb, right? It needs a helping verb to make sense. So A is wrong. B is it is simply cooling. Now it is a pronoun, right, which is introduced, but it confuses the reader even more. Like which antecedent is it referring to? Which noun is it replacing? So that's wrong as well. C is which simply cools. This doesn't make sense as well. It's a relative pronoun which we're not really sure which antecedent it refers to. If you go for D, is simply cooling, that makes sense because simply cooling by itself, it can't be a functional verb, but when you add is, which is a helping verb, it kind of makes sense. So the crocodile is simply cooling its brain. That's how you handle or tackle sentence fragment question subtypes. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we will cover the next question subtype.